Hello everybody and welcome to the Elite Dangerous livestream. This is episode 1 of Discovery Scanner, an Elite Dangerous livestream series taking deep dives into how Elite Dangerous is made and the creation of Elite Dangerous. If you are a little squeamish and you are perhaps don't want some of that magic taken away, just a little tiny bit, we're going to try and keep some of that little secrets to us, some of those things under our hats, to ourselves, up our sleeves, as it were. But if you're a little squeamish, maybe turn away now. Maybe now is the time to turn away, because Dr. Anthony Ross is with us tonight, and he's going to be talking all about the Stellar Forge. You know what? I'm sure Ant is going to be telling us all about. Oh, Dr. Ross, sorry. Dr. Ross, we must all refer to him as Dr. Ross, is going to be telling us exactly what he's going to be telling us about in just a moment. If you had the pleasure of coming along to Frontier Expo 2017, Mr. Ross, Dr. Ross, I've got to get that right, Dr. Ross here, ran a talk, didn't you?
Yes, I sure did.
All about the Stellar Forge and the creation of the galaxy in Elite Dangerous, but not everybody could get in there because it was packed. People were queuing outside of the door for you. Mm-hmm. So we thought we would invite Ross on, Dr. Ross.
It's okay, Ant will do.
Ant, is that all right? Ant, you've got to get these things right. Some people get offended, you know. Got to invite Ant on to deliver this talk in a way that everybody can watch it. This is the first episode of hopefully what is a series called Discovery Scanner, which goes into deep dives about how Elite Dangerous is made. We do have a couple of others queued up, including server talks from Dav. He's trying to make a really interesting talk for you guys, and we have also Mark Allen as well, who's going to coming on to talk about a few of the things that he does behind the scenes with his coding, for example, on stuff like the Thargons. I know he's keen to do that. That's not a confirmation of it, but it's one that is potentially going to be coming up as well. Just really quickly before we get on with all of Dr. Ross's or Ant's talk. Also wanted to say as well, you may have noticed in the new forum section that we created called Beyond. Oh gosh, what's it called? I think it's just called Focused Feedback. That's the one. Basically, I wanted to say there's a new area. If you go over and check that on the forums, we're asking for your feedback about features that are coming to the Beyond series of updates. And next week I'll have Sandro Samarco on the stream, who is going to be talking through some of that feedback that's come through already and going into some more details as to why we're looking for that kind of feedback and why we're looking for focused feedback. So I think that's pretty awesome. I think we're going to be doing, every other week, that sort of thing. So I think it's a really nice selection of cool, awesome live streaming content for you guys, and just keeping the communication lines open with you, telling you what we're doing, what we're working on, and how we worked on it. So on that note, and I'm sorry, I know that you'll get your bit to talk, I promise. On that note, I wanted to say what this live stream isn't. This live stream series isn't about talking about what's coming in the future specifically. This is about saying how things have been done perhaps in the past, and also how things are under the hood. So it's not talking about new features such as because we're doing a lot of work on the colouring, aren't we, and the shaders of the planets, because you actually have a lot to do with that, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, a reasonable amount, and a lot of work in the Beyond series updates going into to making these planets look beautiful again. Some viewers may call it something to do with beige, for example. I wouldn't personally say that, of course. But a lot of work's being done on the colouring of these planets. We won't be talking about that today, other than what I just said. Also, it is going to be very much the talk that you gave at Frontier Expo.
Yes.
But with a couple of in-game examples, which you didn't have the luxury of doing.
Yeah, hopefully that will help be a better visual aid to what I'm trying to ramble on about.
Okay, fantastic. So there's going to be lots of rambling, and I'll try to stop my rambling. But I also want to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming along today to check out our new series. We're trying to do lots of cool, awesome new stuff and keep you guys involved as possible. So thanks. When is Ed going to stop talking, Gazer?
Never stop talking.
Well, you've done it now. I'm going to carry on. Right. Well, what shows? No, I'm joking. All right, so without further ado, Dr. Anthony Ross, hello. First of all, what do you do at Frontier Developments, or are you probably going to get into that?
I'll mention that as part of one of the slides, just so I'm not repeating myself too many times.
Okay, so like I said, if you don't want the magic spoiling, look away now. But it's time to look at, well, actually, our Do you want me to get the slide ready?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is, again, a new format that we're trying out, so if it goes a bit strange at first, you know why. Thanks, Sam.
Right.
So yeah, you can control that.
I've got to get...
Yep.
There we go. How
You're
to
in.
Make a Galaxy by me. So, as Ed mentioned, this is pretty much the talk I did at Frontier Expo, which sadly not everyone could get into. Please do give some feedback afterwards. Is this the information which is interesting? Would you like to know more about what particular things? We'll see what we can build on in the future. But this talk covers our attempt at recreating the Milky Way for a playground for Elite Dangerous, for you to play with, to interact with. So I'll be talking a little bit about what the Milky Way is, what Stellar Forge did to try and mimic it, and also just a few slides on some of the bits behind some of the rendering of some of the planetary bodies. Click. There we go. However, first of all, Zach forced me to put in a slide to tell you who I am. Very un-British, I know, talking about oneself, but hello. Yes, I'm Ant Ross. I began my career as a physicist. I did undergraduate and masters in physics, astrophysics and cosmology at Lancaster, where my focus was on chaotic inflation in the early universe, before going on to my PhD in particle physics, looking at matter-antimatter asymmetry. That was based at Fermilab, if anyone's familiar with that. However, after those days were over, I made the big jump over to Frontier, where I worked as a core programmer on much of the Stellar Forge galaxy generating code, before moving on to the more rendering side, where I find myself now. So yeah, I've been on Elite Dangerous since 2013 and I'm still loving it. So what is the Milky Way? It is a spiral galaxy, and for any astrophysicists out there, let's not talk about modified Newtonian dynamics or anything else. Let's just say that by mass, it's roughly 12% hydrogen, 88% we don't know, dark matter. And that mass is roughly equivalent to around 500 billion suns worth. Now that is spread across very large stars. So I'll just kind of take a break and address something in the chat. I thought Dr. Ross was a northerner. Dr. Ross is a northerner. He was born in Leeds, grew up in Morecambe.
Yeah, Cacalrix asks, Zach, is this chat pre-recorded? I just want to say, no, it's not. We're actually here chatting right away.
So I'm just going to defend that northerness, you know.
Good, I'm glad you did that.
It's very important. Right.
We just don't want to say too much because we're trying to keep it nice and informative, so we don't want to be talking too much. So just keep listening.
Yes,
right.
So, sorry, right. So by mass, about 500 billion suns, but that's spread across very large stars, very small stars. The actual number of stars in the galaxy depends on which particular paper you read, estimated somewhere between 100 and 700 billion stars. And so that's a large number we've got to replicate. And these are spread across very distinct regions of the galaxy. So there is the halo, a spheroid encompassing the entire galaxy. That's my brother, who's had a comment removed. Wow. I'll focus. Okay, and in this halo is bunches of the oldest stars you'll probably find in the galaxy, the most hydrogen pure, orbiting the central plane, globular clusters. And then moving in, you've got these spiral arms, the distinct shape of the spiral galaxy, which is around 1,000 to 10,000 times more dense than the halo, which is split into two distinct populations itself, the thin disk and the thick disk, and they just have different ages of stars, different compositions. And then heading further towards the centre, you get to the galactic core or bulge, which is getting more and more dense, towards Sagittarius A star, the supermassive black hole in the centre, around which you get a density of around 100 stars per cubic parsec, which is quite populated. So, yeah, the Milky Way is very large, but quite flat, as the word disk presumes. So the thin disk has a scale height of around 400 light years, the thick disk a scale height of around 1,000 light years. Now that is an exponential measure of density falling off, so it's not just a hard cut-off, a hard ceiling at 1,000 light years. It's just getting less and less and less dense the further away you get from the central plane. And in the Milky Way there are a lot of stars and also a lot of big old nebulae, various types of nebulae.
I think that's the technical term, isn't it? Big old nebula.
Big, yep, that's the technical description, because they are rather large, a lot of them rather expansive. Large molecular clouds. You can get planetary nebulae, which are the remnants of a supernova, so the outer shells of a star that have been exploded off, and those are very important as well and need to be modelled in. Will this slide's information be part of the test? Yes, it will. It will not be multiple choice either. I hope you brought your A game. And there's also a lot of dust in the Milky Way, especially across the central plane, and that's what's giving the Milky Way its distinctive look in the night sky, the nice patination there. And that's its dust and gas, which is not being illuminated by any nearby stars, so it appears opaque. It's hiding stuff behind it. And there's also a whole bunch of other stuff. You've got your planets, your asteroids, comets, black holes, accretion disks. So many things that we don't really have time to go into here. So Brian Cox will just have to fill in those bits at some point. So now we can talk about trying to recreate this large project. So what we're seeing on this slide here is some of the input data textures which go into making the large-scale view of our galaxy. So we know roughly how much mass is in the entire galaxy. That's a number we can put into it. But how is that distributed? So the picture on the left, the luminosity picture, helps us put this matter into the distinctive shape of the spiral arms, and also helps give a rough, nice rendery colour when we need it. However, the picture in the middle there, that is helping us know what region of the galaxy we are in for any particular pixel we are querying. So the red channel showing the halo, the green the arms, and the blue the galactic bulge showing through as white there, because it's all additive. So that helps us take into account how the arm's 10,000 times more dense, the bulge on average is 100 to 1,000 times more dense. And then the picture on the right there is just helping set out the distribution of that non-illuminated gas, that dust across the galaxy.
Okay.
But you'll see those are all 2D images, but we've got to make a 3D galaxy here. We've got a 3D game.
Just before we move on really quickly, just a bit of context. Yourself, obviously, we heard about your history. Were you hired because of your knowledge of these things as well as your sort of programming abilities and stuff? Is this?
I hope so.
Yeah, so as in when you were specifically brought in because you're like, well, he knows about galaxies, we're trying to build a galaxy, let's get him to do it.
I would have to ask my bosses.
But I'm sure that's the case, right?
Hopefully, yes, yes.
That's what you imagine.
I would assume so.
Which is a really weirdly specific job that you were given.
You do get some physicists making the jump over to the games industry, but it's not that common, so it probably did make a difference, this particular project being about this particular topic. Yeah. And I grew up with this series, so I was quite adamant in getting this job.
Sorry, I won't interrupt too much.
Oh no, please do. It's all good.
They'll be angry if I do that. So
So yeah, we've got to get this 3D galaxy out here. Now I mentioned before we've got a rough handle on the scale heights of the bulge and the thick disk and the thin disk, so we can mathematically describe the height distribution for the matter in the galaxy. So we put all this together and we get this very pre-early alpha rendering of the distribution of stuff in our Elite Dangerous galaxy. So now we've got to put actual stuff in it. Yes, so sectors. Now because we can't store the entire galaxy's generated stuff on your hard drive, it's not big enough, trust me. And because we can't store it on the web servers, they're not big or fast enough, this is procedurally generated as we need it, which is not the same as random. It's following rule sets, it's following mathematics, but it is generated. So to organise this and run this well on a computer, this is split into cubes. Now these sectors, these large sectors, are around 1,280 light years per axis, but each sector has 8 subsectors. Half that distance on each axis again. Each subsector has 8 subsectors, has 8 subsectors, yeah, and so forth. There's 8 layers of that until you get to the smallest cubes of 10 by 10 by 10 light year. Now there's a good reason for this as well, in that because of computational limitations, we can't just make a potentially infinite number of stars per sector. There's got to be an upper limit. And because we have so many more red dwarf stars and small stars than we do large stars, we can allocate a set mass range of stuff to generate in per layer of sector. So the big ones, 1,280 light years, are only making the biggest stuff, which is much less popular. There's much fewer of them. And then the red dwarfs are in the smallest ones, 10 by 10 by 10 light year. There's more of them because they're smaller sectors. So we can have the correct distribution of star sizes out there, or at least star masses. I'll get to size later. And so these sectors also know their approximate age, depending on where they are in the galaxy. They know their approximate metallicity. Now that's just fancy talk for what is in it. So the approximate fraction of elements which aren't hydrogen or helium compared to that of our solar system, typically done with iron. And it also knows its type. And the other good thing about generating in octrees like this is they only need to know information about their neighbouring cells and their parents. Otherwise you might potentially have to know what a particular star system is doing 1,000 light years away and have to generate everything, and it'll be horribly slow. This is nice and fast. And now, as a departure from what was done in the talk, I'm going to try and do some debug rendering.
Quickly come back to us on the screen.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
We're still here.
I'm going to go to the galaxy map in
Do you want me to
a
bring it
build.
onto the screen right now? Or?
1 second. And yes, please.
Yes, okay, so we can go and have a look now.
So
We are running a little bit of a dev. You're seeing a tiny bit behind the scenes here. It's very naughty of us to show this, but you are. We did say there would be behind the scenes, and this is what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, so this is just the galaxy map in dev mode, and I'm going to turn on a visualization for these sectors. And it might be a little bit of a red and green line mess, but these are the smallest sectors here, surrounded by some of the larger parent sectors, surrounded by some of the larger parent sectors, and it's just generating what it needs at any one particular time for displaying what you need. So yeah, the large sectors, they're fast to generate, and we can scroll around easily, and this is making all the stars in all those sectors. It'll generate the smaller sectors as is needed as you're zooming in. And for those interested, the view range is modulated by where you are in the galaxy, because when you get to around here, it's so dense, you might be waiting a few minutes to generate everything if you want that many sectors. So there you go. There's a visualization of these sectors in an octree. YouTube did not like that. I'm very sorry.
Okay, sorry. Do apologise. Nice and slowly. The video on demand version of it, you should be able to see that a little bit smoother. We could perhaps move things a little slower and try again. Yeah, we go back to. You want to go back to the slideshow?
Yes, please. I'll just press the wrong button. Oh, well done.
That's all right. You can close that down. That's okay, Ant. This is why. I should be controlling it. It's that one there.
Yeah. What even are computers?
Okay.
Okay.
Make a galaxy, but you can't control a PowerPoint.
No. This is. Right. Where am I clicking?
Yeah. That's
there we go.
Yeah.
Right, so we've split our galaxy up into our boxes. Now we've got to populate these boxes, and we're going to populate them with systems. Now, when we are talking about a system, it's identified by its primary star. So the main star in the system, the most massive star in the system. So a quick word on the classification of stars, which will be important in a bit. We have two main ones that we go by, the Harvard classification and the Yerkes classification. Now, the Harvard relates temperature to the class, and temperature is also related to the colour. You'll see this in the top right here. O, B, A, F, G, K, M, main sequence stars, also L, T, Y dwarfs. These are good for relating the temperature of the star to its class. And the Yerkes classification gives a good handle on this kind of the size and also kind of the life stage of the star. So a star goes through life a bit like a person or any other living thing does. So a star would begin life as a collapsing overdense part of a nebula. As gravitational attraction starts, a free fall in of all the dust and the gas, which will get hotter and denser. and if there's enough stuff there, it'll eventually reach a point where thermonuclear fusion kicks off. Yes, and you've got a young baby star. And KGB foam.
Yeah, it's the star classification thing, isn't it? The KGB foam.
Oh, right.
Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me.
Yes, so that's the one I learned.
Yeah.
Yes. And then it goes on to its middle age, the main sequence of the star, and that's represented by the 5 on the Yerkes classification. Can you see the mouse on that? Oh, yeah. You got a pointer if you can see that on YouTube. Yep. The ones up here, the smaller Roman numerals, are getting into giants and hypergiants. Further down, you're getting smaller, and to 7, these are the degenerate stars and the dead stars, your white dwarfs, your neutron stars. And that's also taking into account the temperature and energy of the star, and up here is the brightness. So those are the 2 main classifications there. But the main star's also got to know things like its initial mass and final mass, the metallicity, magnitude, which is how bright it is, the radius and the size of the star, where it is in the sector, all the physical information. And this slide is going over the stellar lifetimes that I've just mentioned here. So this is the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, which shows where you get populations of stars, where you commonly find you'll see a star, it's this temperature and it's this brightness, it's part of this population. The big diagonal here being the main sequence, which a star would form onto and join, depending on how much mass was in it. The more mass is in it, the higher up the main sequence it will live. And the more mass that goes into it, the less time it will spend on there. So the big modulator about how long it spends collapsing, how long it spends as a protostar main sequence, as a giant, and when it explodes, depends on how much mass goes into it initially. That's very important. You'll see down at the bottom the relationship for how long it spends on the main sequence, depending on how much stuff is in it. So we'll go into the main sequence, last a time, go up to a supergiant, and end up down here. Right, so... Simple, easy as that. Mm-hmm. So we need to generate our data. So the system will go, I've got a sector, I want to fill in my sector because it's been given a bunch of mass, it's been given a mass range of stuff it's got to generate, give me a system. It'll get the approximate age of the region of space from the sector and be able to work out the approximate life cycle stage it's at from the mass that's been given and that age it's generated. And once it's got that life stage of the star, the generation will branch. There'll be a different set of equations depending on which life stage it's at, because they're all subtly different. But it's still creating values for mass alteration, which is how much mass has been lost over it burning it away over a time or shedding out layers in later life. It'll need to know how large the star is, then the temperature. From the temperature we can get the colour, and there's strong relationships, the Stefan-Boltzmann laws and Wien's law. That'll give us a Harvard classification, along with the life stage, the Yerkes classification. From the radius and temperature, we can work out how bright it is. It's related to temperature to the power 4 radius squared.
Yeah, sorry, shouldn't laugh. I got to keep going.
Oh no,
it's amazing. Yeah, just.
Now just slap a name on it. Find out if this thing needs a planetary nebula. Thank you very much. Give me the next one.
Sorry, you just find out if it needs a nebula.
We find out if it needs a nebula by knowing if it's gone and done an explosion. If it knows if it's done a supernova.
Okay, sorry. Yes, yes.
No worries. Please
stop interrupting the class.
Keep asking.
No, because okay. There's lots more interesting people saying interesting things in the background. That's yeah.
Right, so our system is identified by its main star there, the main body, but that's not the full star system, is it? So we need to create the rest of the stuff. First step in that is this main star part of a binary? Is it part of a binary of binaries? Is it part of a binary? There's many various orbital patterns that could be made by star systems like that. So the first we do is we see how much mass is left over for this sort of thing, and if there are stable orbits that can be populated. Now, if I had my way on a supercomputing cluster, I could make a billion body proper simulation of globules of gas clumping, but that would take a bit long. You might need to wait a few weeks per frame. So instead, we find viable orbits, stable orbits, and then assign things to it. So two things which go into if the orbit's viable or not are the Roche limit and the Hill sphere. Now, the Roche limit tells us how close two bodies can orbit before the gravitational forces rip them apart. And the Hill sphere tells us if we have two bodies and then a third body, which of the two large original bodies does the third body orbit? The Hill sphere gives us that information. Typically, that'll go, the stable orbit is up to half the Hill's radius of the Hill sphere. So, we get these mathematical orbits, these viable orbits. We can assign some leftover gas to them, see if we end up with binaries. And then what is generated, just totally mathematically in your RAM, is a virtual protoplanetary disk. And this is a measure of all of the rest of the elements for the star system and how they're spread out away from that main star in a disk pattern, as the words protoplanetary disk presume. You will not see them in game. These are entirely virtual. It's just data in the RAM as we're calculating, just to answer a question there. But this does help track which elements are in which positions across the star system. You'll get more of the heavier elements closer to the star because it takes more force to push them away than the lighter elements which end up further away, and you end up with ice belts and water dust far, far, far away. And what happens there is, again, we're generating stable orbits through this, and then we take steps across that orbit, finite time steps across, and see what starts gathering across them. So what is being swept through in that time period, in that eon. And then another time period, and another, and we see what starts accumulating. And I apologise for my less than stellar PowerPoint drawing skills.
How dare you?
But hopefully you can see the imagery here of there is a thing accumulating across this disk. And we don't know what it is yet, it's just a clump of elements, but we are tracking various things across the eons, such as how much energy it's getting from that matter compressing from the density, how much it's getting heated up. We're keeping track of how much the solar winds are blowing away these elements. We're taking into account things like gravitational heating. If you've got neighbouring orbits in a resonance, how much those new bodies are squeezing each other, getting hotter. We might even throw in a couple of catastrophic events, such as a rogue body going through the star system, disrupting things. And we can even start saying, hey, these clumps of things, are they starting making clumps around them of their own moon systems or ring systems? Beautiful drawing. And once we have enough information far enough along, we can decide exactly what type of body that's what it's looking like. And then again, the generation branches. So it could go down a, hey, I think I'm going to be a gas giant or an ice giant branch. And it'll decide what elements are at what altitude of its atmosphere for later deciding what coloration they should be and what temperatures they are at the different bands there. It might step through and eventually decide it's got enough mass itself to start thermonuclear fusion and become a new star. The smaller rocky bodies are tracking if it can sustain lighter gases around it, if it's got a magnetic field to protect its new primordial atmosphere from the stellar winds. It's taking into account radiogenic heating as well as the other methods of heating I mentioned before, so we can know how hot the core is, know how hot the mantle is. We know how hot the crust is and the temperature differential between them. From that we know roughly if there's going to be tectonic activity and what stage that's at. If there's going to be volcanic activity, we know what materials will be on the surface of the planet. Lots and lots of stuff. And that will go through and generate all of the bodies of your star system. And I'm going to nip back to the game, but don't look yet.
Okay, don't look yet. Everyone, keep Milky Way.
Main menu.
Thank you for coming along. And can you say just a huge thank you to Anne for you're amazing. well done.
You're a very, very kind person.
No, this is really ridiculous. I don't know how Yeah, I can't even begin to imagine how you started to put this together. If you're not, you're talking very matter of factly, as if we just do this and then we just did this. But
I wasn't alone. Let's say
of
at
course,
least.
yeah, you had a team of people, of course, working with you to make sure.
Oh, when I started, I was part of a team. I wasn't the boss all the time, sadly.
No,
sadly.
Okay, but sometimes.
But now, yes.
But now you are. Well deserved. All right.
So back to the game,
yeah.
please.
Okay.
Yes. So this is a bunch of debug rendering, an early tool from 2013, I believe. So just helping us be able to view some of these systems which are generated and make sure things are looking kind of okay. And this is actually Sol, and you've got Mercury there, Venus, Earth. So this is cheating. This is actually an authored one, but the generated ones look like this. It just defaults to Sol. Asteroid belt there,
Whoa.
Jupiter, Saturn, and a bunch of other craziness going around there. And yeah.
Nice and slowly for the.
I'm sorry, nice and slowly. I will try. It's very hard with this controller.
No,
I
it's okay,
apologise.
okay.
Let's turn the time control off, and so let's see if we can see these bodies moving around. Yeah.
I'm like weirdly getting sort of strange goosebumps from seeing this. I don't even know why. It's just
Space is large and scary. So yeah, this is just the early debug rendering from way pre-alpha. So, but yeah, you can see all the bodies, and they're all moving according to the correct orbital parameters.
okay. And I would just like you to really quickly talk. So there's a couple people saying orrery map, and I just want, and we knew that people would say that when we showed this.
Yes. So we were in two minds there, not to whether to show this debug screen.
Yeah. But we did have it confirmed, by the way, from our bosses and our bosses' bosses to show this. But yeah.
Yeah. But this is. It's got the data for everything in the system and everything can move, but it is far flung. It's far away from a full orrery view yet. It's something that is being considered. We hear people's requests, and there is nothing, or there's no news or nothing coming anytime soon for any official.
There's a
thing
big,
of this.
huge difference between this debug menu and being able to see this stuff behind the scenes and the implementation of it, and actually making that a viable thing to go in a video game. There's a huge, many hours and steps in between that.
A lot of people need to be involved and a lot of time.
Yeah, I know that people are teasing, but I still thought I wanted to bring it up. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Netwise is asking what the orrery, and that is a word which is hard to pronounce for me. Orrery. Right. So, where am I at? Let's go back to the talk, please.
Okay.
Bop. Right, so nobody point out the mathematical mistake that was in this slide, which I never got round to fixing. 10 points, if you know what it is. Tell everyone in the chat. So identifiers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a generated system. We only have the data on hand when we require it and if we require it. So everybody, everything you can visit in the game needs its own unique identifier, because at any particular moment we might need the data for that thing. So this is like your house or apartment has to have its own house number and postcode, or zip code for those in the US, or whichever postal system you use wherever you are. Everything's got to be unique, because we've got to know we are meaning this planet from this system at this particular time right now. So I just wanted to have a quick talk about identifiers, because numbers are interesting to me. You'll have to put up with me for a couple of minutes.
Oh, that's fine.
Sure, so
these guys
this is we call this our body address, and this is a 64-bit integer number, which is typically the largest. I'm looking at the answers. I'm looking at the where am I? So yeah, an unsigned 64-bit number, largest we get to play with in games typically. And so this is 64 zeros or ones. 64-bit, a bit is a 0 or 1 there, and that will give us 2 to the 64 combinations, and that's about 18.5 quintillion numbers, I believe, 18.5 quintillion addresses, which should be enough for a galaxy with 400 billion star system. So that should do us okay. And what we can do is we can take these 64 zeros or ones and split it up into different sections. And so we can have a set number of them set aside to know what the address of the sector is and what the layer of the sector is, and a set number of them for the system within the sector, and a set number of them for the body within the system. And this can then also act as the RNGesus. Yes, this also relates to the level of RNG that is in there, which does help drive the procedural generation, which isn't random, it is scientific, and disclaimer. Yes, this unique identifier allows us to have a unique seed for generating these numbers. Right, so now a big old sidestep to some of the rendering aspects. And I wanted to chat about nebulae. Now, what you'd see in a nebula is quite interesting. It depends on the ambient temperature of the gas as to what wavelengths it's emitting. It depends on which stars are nearby for reflected light of it. It depends on what stars are behind it. So, because a star may generate and emit a bunch of wavelengths, but then if it's passing through this diffuse gas, there's going to be particular wavelengths of it that are absorbed. There's an absorption spectra. So the light you'll see coming out the other end of the nebula isn't the same as the light on the other side. And to model all of that for a scene in the galaxy map, which could have a dozen nebulae and thousands of stars, that's far too computationally expensive. So we need a bit of a trick for rendering it. So the way we looked at this was to have two textures. And we have a 3D volume texture, which tells us at any particular point how dense the nebula is, and also an ambient colour it would have from its approximate temperature. And then there's a second texture, a 1D one, it's like a line of data, and that maps the density at that point to which wavelengths are absorbed due to that density. And then it's a case of drawing a line from your eyeball to the back of the nebula, and stepping from the back of the nebula towards you, subtracting colours from light until it hits your eye. And that means that's the view, what you see is view dependent as you move the camera around, and it kind of gives a nice effect. So here's a professionally drawn representation of this, stepping through the nebula, same size steps, the colour changing as it goes through.
You weren't hired as an artist, to be fair.
Sadly not, but if anyone does want to see my paintings, I can show you my DeviantArt at some point.
Yeah, you are good at drawing. Sorry, I shouldn't feel rude.
No, I can't do computer art, and I can't do PowerPoint art at all.
Look, we're not going to hold this against you.
So this is a view of some of the region somewhere around the Bernard Loop, and yeah, I think the effect comes off in game. But what about the dust? Now, the dark, non-emissive dust is a lot more prevalent than these bright nebulae. So even with our technique of rendering them, it's still not going to be fast enough for all these. So what we do is we layer upon layer upon layer instances of this dark, opaque dust, which just blocks out the light and the colour from things behind it. And it's distributed in another octree-like system. So we only generate what we need, and it's already fast enough. And yeah, that can create enough layers to block out enough stuff behind it to give the right look, I believe. Because it doesn't need as much detail as the other nebulae, because you can't visit one of these as a discrete region of space. It's just more of a continuous matter. This is an old version of the dust, but because there was fewer stuff in it, it kind of highlights it. So, planets. Now, there was a very long and in-depth interesting stream from a beardless Ed a while ago.
That is an old stream. Look at our weird little box thing that we had going on, because we had two separate weird... Anyway, sorry, let's not stream about that.
But yeah, that was Matthew Dickinson, the head of Render and Technical Art, and Jonathan Bertoni, the Assistant Director of Art, if I've got that correct. And they talked about the Horizons planets and how they're generated and displayed. So what I'll do today is a much quicker version of that, but also talk about the V1 planets. Now, V1 is just internally what we call the original planets that you couldn't land on, but this also counts for stars and the gas giants as well. Now, what you see on the right here is a noise graph. So what happens with planets and stars, this is a collaboration between the programmers and the artists. And the programmers create mathematical functions called noise modules. And if you resolve that mathematical function across a series of coordinates, it'll build up a shape. And that shape could be the shape of a coastline, or a shape of a mountain, the shape of a fissure, shape of a crater. And then these are mixed and blended together between the artists and the programmers into something which will create an entire planet when fully resolved. And it ends up being a ginormous webby graph like that. But how is this used to show the planets? So what we're seeing here is a hell world, I believe. Is that internal classification anyway?
It's internal classification, yeah.
Okay.
But that's fascinating stuff. Again, keep going. It's interesting.
So,
hell world.
How do we use this noise graph to put something on your screen? Well, we've got this big old, mostly spherical planet, and we crush it flat. Flat as a pancake. It's just a circle which is now facing you. And we, again, drawing a line from your eye to any particular part in that circle, and then resolve that noise graph. And we can get out the height at that point, and the coloration, the normal, which is which way is the ground facing, for clouds, for clouded planets. And that is built up. We create the entire surface like that. Now, we don't just create a circle because we don't have circular textures in computing. We have square or rectangular ones. So we make this entire square texture, and it's just projected flat onto that circle in space, and that appears to be a 3D planet. That's just the way it works. It's all magic. The downsides to this is you can't land on these planets, because the closer you get, the bigger texture you need to get the right amount of detail. And we can't make an infinitely sized texture, sadly. And also, if you're flying around the planet, you'll need to keep regenerating this texture, which is a bit of a pain. It's not quite flexible enough for landing on. But the upside is the areas which are facing you and you can see the most of get the most detail. The areas around the edge of the planet, you end up with more surface area per pixel. But you don't need as much detail because you can't see it, it's facing away from you. So that's a nice upside to this technique. But Horizons planets, let's not go to Horizons planets just yet. Let's just show the system in use.
Okay.
I'm going to do a thing with the game. Don't look just yet, please.
Don't look just yet. No,
don't look.
Everyone look away.
You might see.
Tea break. Not tea break.
Don't look behind the curtain.
I think we're already looking partly behind the curtain as it is. Yeah, and thanks everyone again for coming down. This is just the first of deep dives behind the scenes on some of the stuff behind Elite Dangerous and the creation of Elite Dangerous. Hopefully, it's not spoiling the magic too much. I don't think it is. I think it's you find a nice balance, and it's. I mean, if anything, it makes it more magical when you see how impressive this stuff is and how detailed this stuff is.
You're very kind. So back to the game. We might be near Jupiter. And
Perhaps.
Here it is in its splendour. And what I'm going to try and get up on the screen is a debug view of these textures being generated as we go along.
And if Ant forgets any of the codes, do forgive him.
Yeah, most of them should be saved in there, I hope. Ah, there we go. So of course you can see Jupiter on screen, but it's also generating the other body's worth of information around you that you might be looking at any time. And if you can see I'm going to try and make these bigger.
What? What?
As you're getting closer, these textures are regenerated.
What?
With work spread across the frames. And so you don't get any horrible frame spikes as it's trying to rework them. And it'll just continually do that to the resolution it needs, to the amount of detail it needs.
What?
The further away you are, the smaller the textures, the quicker they are to make. So it doesn't matter if you go a bit faster. And it's going a bit crazy. There we go. So there you go. There's our planetary texture generation. Squares, our rectangles. Right.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is turn the screen off, tell it to do
Do you need
the...
me to get off the camera?
yeah, sure. Let's go back to us for a second. Hiya.
Just I was like... What?
And I'm going to take it to another planet as I talk about our next slide first.
I think, if anything, this stuff is... if anything, looking behind the curtain a little, just kind of explains to the community, and they can understand a little bit better why these things take time to implement or develop. So, good, exciting.
Just to address a point by Titus Balls there, you get choppy textures until it loads in properly. That is a downside depending on the size of the texture you're making in your graphics card. We have identified somewhere to help share that work per frame better in the future, in future releases. So
that's cool.
We are always looking to improve and fix and optimize stuff as we are going along. Nothing's ever left behind.
Excellent.
Anyway, so slides, please.
What was I saying? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm watching the chat as well as they're coming in. Interesting things.
Yes. So this slide is just mentioning those horizon surfaces. Now, if you want to drive around in it or land on it, we're going to have to actually make some geometry. It can't just be a flat circle with a texture on it. And so, yes, we're going to make our meshes and then populate the meshes with textures and also height deformations. Now, as a point of interest, Horizon's planets start life as a cube floating in space, not a sphere. It begins as a cube, which then gets spherified out. It's blown up like a beach ball. And then each of the points on that sphere are then deformed by that noise graph again. But also, these Horizons planets have not an octree system like before, but a quad tree system. So a patch has a set number of points within it. As you get closer, that patch subdivides into 4 sub-patches, and each of those sub-patches has the same amount of points again. So you get more detail and more detail the closer you get in, but you're not making unnecessary detail when you're too far away. So, if we go back to the game, please.
No. Well, I'll wait for you to tell me.
Yeah, let's try now.
Okay.
So this is Europa in Sol, and this is Europa in Sol in wireframe mode. So hopefully this isn't going to be too horrible on YouTube again.
Maybe, but hopefully it will work for people in the VOD as well.
Disclaimer: if any asserts pop up, that's because I'm in dev mode and flying very far away in a debug camera. So you can kind of see from far back here, this used to be a cube, and it's been blown out into a beach ball. And as you get closer to the surface, it gets populated with the sub-patches. And sub-patches. And more sub-patches. And to hide this a bit, if you're on a high enough detail setting, the points will morph between the 2 settings.
No. Sorry, my brain just snapped. What? So explain that again. So
you'll see, I'm going to point at the screen, but you're not going to be able to see it on the screen. So you can see some fine detail patches here and a less fine detail patch.
Right.
Now, if this wasn't in wireframe mode, you won't see those same points. You won't see that discrepancy. You'll see the 2 regions merging into each other, morphing. So smoothly transferring, and it kind of hides it, which is nice. But you can't see that in wireframe mode, I'm afraid.
Yes.
There you go, more detail, all the way down.
And this is probably going to cause some problems with the video codec on the streaming, but again, the VOD should be able to show these
Very
things.
sorry, yes. Unfortunately, as everything's in wireframe, you're seeing everything behind the train as well.
Gosh.
So yeah, there's a lot of data being generated there. But yeah, here we go. It's a planet. It's Europa. Right, so back to the thing. Let's do the thing, please.
Okay. Yes.
There we go. Yes, noise graphs. Different noise graphs for different planets, for different types, for the different generation of planets. But it's not all noise graphs. We've got to make the system flexible enough for whatever the artists or designers might want to do on a planet. A very bespoke scenery, a vista, or a man-made base. And so some terrain's got to be injectable as well. So yeah, height data can be injected where it needs to be in the system. But unfortunately, despite my most violent protests, they wouldn't let me keep my face on the planet, and I had to remove it.
That's a shame. Not hidden somewhere. So are you telling me that it's not hidden somewhere in the galaxy? You weren't allowed?
If it is and I admitted it, there might be trouble.
Alright, okay. No, so don't go searching for people's faces in the game. Okay, right, okay. Don't do that because they don't exist. Okay.
Well, interestingly enough, there was a bug where people's faces were in planets, but that was a bug. That was just pure texture, though.
Yeah, okay.
That's been long fixed, though. So yeah, we had a look at the Milky Way. We had a look at how much stuff is in it and how it's distributed, and we made our own version for you to play a game in. So we had our mass of a galaxy, where we've got our distribution in the spiral arms, we've got our mass distributions per sector and per sector layer, and then we put stuff in the sector layers, and then we put stuff around the stuff in the sector layers, and we had our primary system, our primary stars, secondary stars, and all the bodies around it, and then you get to go in and visit them all. And yeah, we made a galaxy of stuff all for you, including some of this information here, which is going to scroll by. This is the end of the talk, by the way. So apologies for all the stuff in here that I didn't get to talk about, but these are some of the aspects going into Stellar Forge and in Elite Dangerous, and our game, which we're very proud of and happy to still be working on today.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And well, we'll leave this just playing over the screen in the background. Others, which I cannot talk about or have forgotten to add in here. I wish there was a room full of people to give you a round of applause, because that was, I mean, there's a stream full of people, so please put your claps in the chat, please, or your just, appreciation for, oh, we've got one last thing. Big thank you there from Anne at the end of the stream as well.
Yes, thank you very much for coming and listening to this.
Yeah, please put some appreciation in the chat for Anne for coming along to do this. But not just coming along to do this for you guys as well and sharing this information, but also just for doing it in the first place, for working with the guys and making this a possibility. It seems like a lot of interesting stuff that slow mode is on as well. Yes, so unfortunately it's not going to come through as quickly as you'd like. But yes, as you can see, people seem to enjoy it. Now, I do know that Paige has been grabbing some questions that have been coming through, and I think she's copied them into a Word document for you. So this may be, if you get some time, maybe, dare I say it, over lunch tomorrow or something, because I know that you're very busy continuing improvements on the game. Maybe you could have a look over, answer some, and put them into a forum post underneath the announcement for the stream. Perhaps. Do you think that would be something that would be possible?
I'll certainly give it a shot.
Give it a shot. Have a look and see how you feel. Because we didn't have time, unfortunately, tonight for questions.
I'm sorry for rambling too long.
No, it was absolutely perfect. It was really, really excellent. And I want to say one last time before everybody does go. This is part of a new series. It's called Discovery Scanner, as written in the top corner. And what this is kind of looks at, like you say, a little bit behind the curtain at how Elite Dangerous is made without spoiling the magic too much. And just kind of giving you guys an insight into how these things are implemented. As well as that, next week we have Sandro Samarco here on the live stream as well, talking about the Beyond focused feedback thread, which has been created on the Elite Dangerous forums, and it's on there right now. And he's going to come along and talk about some of the feedback that we've been given in that, and that's feedback and it's information about features that have been worked on for the Beyond series of updates. So taking some of the feedback already, doing a bit of a roundup and explaining why we need that feedback too. So that should be interesting. We just kind of want to open up these communication lines with you and keep you up to date with what's going on in the Elite Dangerous. So I'll have confirmation in the next few days or the next week about what episode 2 of this is going to be. So not next week, but the week after. This time in 2 weeks today, basically, is going to be the next episode, I suppose you might call it, of Discovery Scanner. We'll try and keep them as regular as possible for you guys. But thanks again, and you're all wonderful, and thank you so much. Honestly, genuinely, I'm baffled, but also amazed in a positive way. I can only imagine what it was like working on this from in the beginning and just seeing it all coming together. Do you feel a sense of pride when you see people exploring this galaxy and inhabiting it?
I'm watching Reddit every day. I'm reading Reddit every day for the screenshots, and yeah,
Yeah, it must be.
Makes it worth it.
Yeah, it must be something that you feel, and well deserved as well. So.
But the story's not over yet.
Dr. Ross, what's your commander name? If people do want to find out more about you and sort of maybe
shoot me in space.
Shoot you in space. Well, you don't have to say your commander name, but whatever you feel comfortable with giving away, like maybe your Twitter name or something.
Oh yeah, so my Twitter account is @TheRoss, all one word.
@TheRoss, all one word. So you can tweet at him in 280 characters. All right, thanks everybody. I kind of feel in a weird way like I don't want to end the stream. But I'm going to do it. Thanks a lot. Thanks again. Hopefully this will be uploaded very soon for people to watch back later as well. And we'll see you all very soon. Bye!